Hello, Tim here. In this video, I'll be taking you through an edited recording of one of my live demos that I gave to my Patreon members. It's one of our regular monthly projects we do together where we all paint the same scene, and I give a personal video critique of each member's paintings. This month we travelled, virtually of course, to sunny Rio de Janeiro. We'll be painting that famous beach scene with the twin peaks in the distance, the soft cloud rolling in, and the waves sparkling in the morning light. I'm going to take you through the whole painting process step by step. You'll see everything from the first pencil marks right through to the final brush strokes. I'll explain my thinking as I go through, talk about colours, brush techniques, timing, and how to keep that lovely loose feeling in watercolour. So grab your brushes, a cuppa, and paint along if you like. By the end, you'll have a few new tricks for painting skies, seas, and distant mountains. If you enjoy this one and would like to take part in future projects, come and join me on Patreon or visit my website, timwilmotartist.com, for more details on my workshops and demos. You join me as I'm just talking through the all-important first stage of any painting, trying to think out, trying to work out in your mind the composition, and I go around the scene in a little bit more detail. Yes, so welcome to our October painting project. We're continuing our virtual trip around the world, and this month we are in sunny Rio, and we're looking at a sort of iconic beach scene, I would say, with the surf coming in, the beach on the right. And we're looking towards the two mountains there in front of the twin peaks of the two mountains. And this is going to be an exercise in a couple of things. First of all, trying to use the right technique for getting low-lying clouds on those mountains on the left there. This flat top mountain sits behind the two brothers there. This one I think is called Gavea or something like that, this flat top one. A good distance away from these two, but we've got some low-lying cloud coming over that. And this is going to be a test of soft edges in watercolor, the technique. And we did discuss this on our last Zoom call. We actually went through about 3 or 4 different methods or techniques that we could use for getting those soft edges above and below that cloud creeping in there from the left. We've also got some, if I just pan over to the right, we've also got some there on the right. Not sure what those mountains are called there, but loads of them coming in from the right, some dark clouds coming in. And those clouds themselves, there's some really light areas like that patch up there, the gap between Gavi and the two brothers. There's a little bit of a white area there, but some very dark clouds, some warmer clouds, cool clouds. So we're going to have a bit of fun in painting clouds. Then coming down, the two brothers themselves, beautiful rock structure, texture on those rocks, very warm. Like a reddish color. So I'm imagining what colors I'm going to get in there. There's a little bit of yellow ochre for some of the lighter exposed rock. Then they're capped with dark trees. Then lower down the slopes, we've got where the slopes are less steep. They're covered in these trees. And lower down still, we have the shanty towns, the favelas. This hotel here, I think, is the Sheraton. If I zoom in, I think that's the Sheraton Hotel. Another shanty town there, sloping down to the water's edge. And then over to the right, a sort of typical cityscape scene with those tall apartment blocks coming right down to the beach. Now, the lower half of the scene, we've got that beautiful sea and the waves coming in, the surf coming in. There's some bathers on the right-hand side. So we're going to have a bit of fun and use a few different techniques for creating some movement in those waves and the movement in the water and the shallow water coming into the beach in that bottom right hand corner. Yes, I hope you enjoy this one, everyone. And of course, those of you on the critique level on Patreon, we've got these different tiers, the different membership levels on Patreon. You get to send me a photo of your painting, and I will give you a video critique by return and just point out, in my opinion, just point out things that I think went well, maybe some things that you could improve on. But everyone on Patreon, welcome to take part and do your own version of this. I know some of you have had a go already. Lovely to see those. Pop them in our gallery on Patreon, and so that we can all take a look and make our positive comments to it. Right, so that's the scene. Go back to, on those of you on Patreon, go back to look at our recording a couple of days ago of the Zoom call, where we went into a lot more detail on everyone's different ideas about how to maybe make some changes to the composition and moving things around and cropping things and even going a vertical orientation on this as well. So go back to that recording if you want to get a few more pointers on different ideas how you might tackle this scene. Right, let's go back to me then, and I'll just go through my materials with you. I'm using for this one my normal Saunders Waterford cold press paper, 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints are from Mark Chapman in the UK. I've got neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, viridian green. We're using quite a lot of those. Then a cobalt green. We've got cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red or English oxide, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, lavender, quinacridone gold, and a couple of gouache paints here in the bottom right-hand corner. Brushes wise, I'll be using approximately, well, about 4 main brushes. My go-to brush, the Tintoretto mop brush, good point, good water, good paint holding capability. Then a medium round pointed synthetic brush, a small, quite a narrow flat brush there, and a very small pointed round brush as well. Let me just discuss with you my ideas about how I might tackle this. So you can see here an outline of the main objects of the composition, and you can see from the photo. I should say thanks very much to Sandra for the kind sharing of your photo. What I do with these monthly projects is that I generally always choose one of your photos for these. So keep them coming, and we'll be continuing our journey in the coming months around the South American continent. So thanks very much, Sandra. So you can see here my thoughts about the composition, the placement of the 2 brother mountains slightly left of the center line. First of all, the horizon a little bit below the center line there horizontally. So there's my water's edge. So 2 brothers there. We've got the flat top Gavlia, the cloud coming in, the low cloud coming in from that side. We've got the shape of the shanty towns there, the Sheraton Hotel there, the city, nudging that maybe a little bit more to the left. But when I draw painting this cityscape, I'm not going to draw every single apartment block or block of buildings exactly as I see in the film. I'm going to kind of be fairly creative and just create the impression of that city down there by the water's edge. Then we've got the background mountains as well. I was thinking about maybe having some kind of small boat fighting its way through the surf, going in this direction. So something to fill in that sea area there, because it's quite a large area. I know I've got these waves coming in, but it's quite a large area to fill in the composition. We've got a couple of waves coming in, and then I've sneaked in a little bit of the beach there, just to give a little bit more context to the scene, a little bit of the beach there with the shallow water coming in, and maybe a few bathers in there also. These numbers relate to the sequence that I'm going to go through the painting, starting with the sky, the all-important sky. And then when that is dry, I'm going to create some soft edges with the clouds and paint in the harder edges of the background mountains on the left and the right, trying to get soft edges around those clouds. Then I move on then to the two brothers, the warm side of the two brothers. The light is coming from the right, so the lighter area of the rocks, trying to keep them fairly light. They're dark in the sky, but fairly light. Then the darker trees, the forest on the cap of the hills, down the left-hand side, in that middle portion there, negatively painting around the shanty towns as well, negatively painting around the hotel and the apartment blocks of the cityscape. Dropping a little bit of color into, trying to go a little bit darker, dropping various shades of green on when I'm painting in that forest area. So that brings us down to that halfway line, a little bit of a light gap then along that water's edge. The sea, dark in the distance, lighter in the foreground where the waves are breaking up on the beach. I need to negatively paint around the waves as well and the boat. So about 2 or 3 rows of waves coming in, and then finally, well, the beach there, but finally a little bit more detail to the buildings, just to make them a little bit more building-like. There's lots of sort of horizontal lines of windows, so we get those in. And 8 is just really further details, to putting it all together, little dabs of paint just as I say, to pull it together. So I might be referring to that as I go through. As we have on this live event, we do have a question section. Those of you listening, watching live, pop your question into the question section. You'll see the icon for that on the right-hand side. When I've got relevant pauses in the process, I'll go to that and try and do my best to answer any of your questions. I will also be, to speed up the process, I will be using a hairdryer now and again, so I'll give you warning of that, just to speed up the process, so we're not waiting around for the paper to dry. Right, so let me crack on then with the all-important drawing. And I'm going to start off with the water's edge, trying to get that right. As I say, for me, I'm giving the emphasis on the top half of the composition, the mountains and the clouds. So I want my water's edge to be slightly below that middle horizontal line. So somewhere around about there. And put in, as good as I can manage, a horizontal line. Doesn't need to be perfect, because this line is where in the distance, there's a lot of surf hitting the rocks, and there's a lot of mist on the beach on the right-hand side. So it doesn't need to be a perfect line, but try and get it as horizontal as I can. So that will be the water's edge. That will be the base of the apartment blocks on the right-hand side. Next, the Two Brothers Mountains, as they're rising up from the left-hand side and steadily increasing in gradient and almost like a pointed top to the tallest peak, and then the lower peak, again, equally pointed. It's got the right-hand side is a little bit more, oh no, they are quite vertical. The right-hand side is a little bit more vertical than the left-hand side. Now, as it comes down about here, it's sort of, these woods are sort of caressing the side of the mountains. So the slopes get less steep and they go down to the city on the right-hand side. So I'll make sure I get the placement of these two correct. And then over to the left, the flat top distant mountain is around about there. It's lower than the Two Brothers, or it's certainly lower than the tallest peak. And I'm just gonna draw in that top right corner of that flat top mountain. Then we got the clouds coming in there, and the rest of that flat top mountain that sort of runs away to that left-hand side like that. Over to the right-hand side, we can't, with the cloud cover, we can't really see too much of what's going on, but there's a low-lying, it could be another shanty town in there, just sort of nestling in the valley. And then there are some mountain tops that we can see. It looks like there's another flat top mountain there. And then over to the right, slightly higher, more of a sort of rounded top mountain there. Next, the shape of the shanty towns and the other parts of the city. First of all, on the left-hand side, coming down to the Sheraton Hotel, which is around about there. Quite a simple shape, quite a bright rectangle, and there's another part of it that goes over to the left. Then the shanty town on the left-hand side, which I remarked on our Zoom call, it looks a little bit, the shape of it looks a little bit like the southern half of the UK, with Wales here, the South Wales Peninsula here, and we got the Bristol Channel, and then we've got Land's End coming down here, and Devon, and Southampton over to the Kent coast on the right-hand side. Just a rough outline of that area of dwellings. To the right of the Sheraton Hotel, there's another slope of buildings, something like that. Going back to the Two Brothers, on the lower peak, we've got the tree is capped with these trees, and That's in the shade on that side there. This is quite dark as well. And then from this sort of neck here, the tree line slopes down, a bit of a jagged edge to the hotel. Continuing over the right-hand side, we have around about here, we've got the buildings that start off fairly low, but they increase in height. So just a few shapes to define those. I'm not necessarily copying exactly the placement and the shape of all those buildings, but just trying to get the impression of them. There is one building, a tall, narrow one, that is a little bit higher than the Sheraton Hotel. So we get that one in, that stands out quite a lot. Let's have that taller one in there. And then they rise up again. Something like that. So just the impression of that, those city buildings down to the water's edge. Down to the sea then, and I'm going to draw in the outline of some key waves. There's a little bit of perspective here, trying to get the angle, the curve right of these waves. So they're coming into the beach on the right-hand side, of course, and we don't want them to be angled. We don't want to have a wide loop or curve to it. We want a fairly tight curve to them. There's a little wave breaking there. And then my main wave is here. We'll have that boat, get in a boat that's trying to make its way through the surf. Get that boat in there. Waves continue beyond the boat and breaking onto the shoreline on the right-hand side. There's another smaller wave that's just receding back here. There's my beach in the bottom right-hand corner. That is, just make sure I've got everything in. That is pretty much it for the drawing. Making sure I've got the composition, I'm comfortable with the composition, the placement of the two brothers, not leaving a bit of a gap as I want a bit of that sky in. So not making the peak too close to the top there, but just enough space to have enough of the sky in. Then making sure the placement of the water's edge as well, so they've got enough space for the water. When you do yours, you may want to have the bias on the water, so you're going to have the horizon a little bit higher, or you might go along with me and have it a little bit lower and concentrate more on those clouds. Once I'm happy with the drawing, it's down to painting, of course. Let me just check if there's any questions. I don't think there is. Maybe you can pop into chat if you are painting along with me, because towards the end, those of you on here live on Patreon, we can open out the event to see and hear you, just to see any painting that you might have done, or drawing or sketch or work in progress. So let me know in chat if you're painting along with me. So Barb and Fazia are, Ben is. Good, right. Step one then, the sky. And I'm just going to dampen the top half of my scene with a soft sponge with clear water, just to pre-wet it, just to dampen the surface a little bit, which will help me get my soft edges. Just a little bit of water, not too much. So use a soft sponge or a flat brush or a big brush, just to pre-wet that paper. Now for the clouds, there's a mixture of warm and cool clouds, lighter clouds as well. So we've got a little bit of a mixture there. So try and get in a lot of variety in those clouds and cloud shapes. Think about these soft edges as well. We're working light to dark, of course, so we'll start off with the lighter clouds first. Being careful to leave that area unpainted, and maybe over here as well. So quite light here. That's going to give us a lot of contrast with the dark of the left-hand side of this peak here with those lighter clouds. That could be quite a nice sort of focal point and a feature of the painting. My cloud color is generally, I often choose an ultramarine blue and a burnt umber. So I'll start off with a very weak mixture of those two, about 50-50. Obviously, if you want to go warmer, more brown, you want to go cooler, more blue, but just lay in this on that damp paper. And where you want to warm things up even more, you could add in a little bit of light red, or I'm going to choose a little bit of yellow ochre. But predominantly it's mainly ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt umber. Add in a little bit more water, make the mix weaker with some water if I want to go lighter with these clouds. Now, as it's still damp, I can drop in some darker, thicker color just to get the darker edges to some of those clouds. Some of the lower parts of the clouds are a little bit darker. Or you could lift out where you see my technique for laying down those clouds was dabbing the paper, but where you see lighter areas, you could exaggerate those and expand on those by lifting out with a damp brush. And where you want to go darker, stronger mix, might just go down to a smaller brush. I'm going to use now my small or small to medium pointed round brush. But those same two colors, a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, sorry, burnt umber, and then just drop that in. Lightly. And again, to get the lighter edge, just lift off. Now, continuing down the top half of the scene, some yellow ochre for a base color for the two brothers. Paint around the hotel and around the edge of the shanty town, top left corner. Just taking the white off the paper, just covering up that top half. So I'm still adding in a little bit of my cloud air is still quite damp. Of course, where you are, you may have different humidity levels, but mine's staying quite damp. You can't see my paper's still quite buckled as well. To speed up the drying process, I'm not going to use my hairdryer, so excuse me, everyone. My microphone may cut out, but just in case it doesn't. So 3, 2, 1. right, so I'm making the paper completely dry, and then to get the soft edges around the edges of the clouds, with the darker mountains behind them, I'm just going to drop in a little bit of clear water where I want that soft edge to be. So I've got one here. We've got a cloud coming in from the left-hand side, just below the flat-topped mountain there. So I'm going to drop in some clear water. And then there's a few in the distant mountains on the right-hand side. There's a few clouds coming in there as well. And the peak of this mountain, that's got a cloud on top as well. So let's add a bit of clear water there. Now I can drop in left and right those distant mountains. The color I'm going to choose for this is a cool darkish green. So a little bit of reading green, a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, not too dark. And then let's get the flat top one in first. And that comes down to this little damp area here. And hopefully we get our soft edge. So a vertical, there's like a little right angle corner there, vertical face to it. And then below the cloud, continuing on down the slope. It's a little bit darker than the top part. Over the edge of my paper, and we're coming down to the top of that shanty town. Maybe we've got the profile of a few lighter buildings there. That's that one. Right, over on the right-hand side, similar colors. Don't want to go too dark because I want to keep this, I want to keep the value of this different from the value of the distant hills. We've got another flat top here coming down. And then below that cloud, continuing down, meets that little village in in the valley there. Up to that peak. Soft cloud just obscuring the top of that peak. And then down to the city below, painting around. So we need some nice straight edges, sharp corners for painting around that city. I can get a little bit warmer with the green now as we're coming down. And keep mixing up the colours. Picked up a little bit of ultramarine blue to go darker. A little bit of spring green to show where there might be some light. The light hitting parts of that wooded, those wooded slopes. Now, start painting around. This will be fairly tedious for you to watch, but it's very important to get these nice edges. And pointed corners. You might want to do this with a flat brush. That would be a good brush to choose. Yeah. Not too much detail. We want that to look as if it's way off there in the distance. If you see some of your clouds going a little bit darker, or the paint has gone into that cloud area too much, of course you can lift it off, or I could also use a damp sponge as well, just to lightly pick up some extra paint. Make sure it's clean though, your sponge or your brush. There we are, a little bit of a diagonal shape of clouds going down there. Now, next will be the two brothers and the warm rocks, trying to get them right, get the color right. Not too dark. Keep it warm. We're going to go darker with the trees around it. So my color for this will be, I think, ultramarine blue and a little bit of alizarin crimson. I can do a test first of all, just to make sure I'm on the right lines. But let me just use my mop brush again. Actually, before I do this, I might just dry up this right-hand edge here, because I will be, shortly after that, I will be going in with the the wooded slopes coming down this side here. So just excuse me a second. I'm going to dry up this edge here. There we are. Right. Ultramarine blue and a little bit of alizarin crimson. Not too dark. Probably a 50-50 mix. And I'll start with the tallest peak first of all. Make sure this is dry because I want a hard edge. Now you could use here a dry brush technique. So I've just taken off a lot of paint off my brush, and using a dry brush technique with rough paper, we're going to leave exposed some of the paper. And that will give us that, with my yellow ochre below, that'll just expose some of that and give us the feeling of that rock, the lighter rock below. Ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. The lower peak, a little bit more blue. And to the hotel. A little bit of red. There we are. Now, next will be the darker tree slopes. Quite dark there. We're going to get a bit of contrast with the lighter sky behind. Lighter here. Not too dark there. So that's going to be the darkest area in there. Just coming down from that peak. So for this, let's mix something in here. Bit of viridian green, bit of spring green. I'll start with the left-hand side first of all. Ultramarine blue, viridian green, spring green. I want to try and get it a little bit darker than those distant mountains. That's why I picked up the ultramarine blue. And we're painting around the shape of that shanty town. And a little bit how I painted around these tall apartment blocks here, trying to get some straight edges. Doesn't matter if I leave little bits of the paper unpainted. They could be small buildings dotted around the slopes. And then down to the water's edge. Then up to the left-hand side of this hotel, a little bit of burnt sienna to warm it up a bit. And then up that left-hand side, and we're meeting the lower slopes. I'll make the vertical sides of the hotel. There's a little bit of greenery just above. Now that slope there, that needs to be darker. I'll start at the top and come down to the top of the town. Mix up something dark here. And then start from the peak. Gradually making this darker area wider as I come down. So top of the town again, a sort of geometric shape to the edge of that town. And now the little tree cap here on the lower peak, up to the top. And then the right-hand side. Viridian green, spring green. So I guess these slopes here, the wooded slopes here, they're going up the bottom of the vertical slopes of the two brothers there, and then they sort of turn the corner and they go around the back of these mountains. I make this a little bit darker than the distant mountains. That's going to push those mountains back a little bit more. Bottom of the slopes, down to the hotel, and then around this little shanty town. That's the water's edge, almost, and up to the start of those buildings. Again, trying to create those straight lines, pointed corners of those buildings. There's a little bit of greenery just on the, I guess, the edge of the water, below those buildings, just a little bit of greenery there. We'll make that darker when we do the buildings. While this is still damp, I can go in with darker, thicker color. I need to go just dark in here. And there's a few little dark patches here and there. There we are. Right, the towns and buildings, I'll come back to those. Now let's put in the water. I'll just check for any questions, if there are any. No, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so I hope you're all doing well with this so far. Right, water, darker in the distance, lighter, quite light as it's breaking onto the beach, and it's shallower water. But in the distance, a lovely dark blue, turquoise, something like that. So for this ultramarine blue, little bit of viridian green. Little bit of burnt umber, tiny bit just to go a little bit darker. And I don't need to be particularly straight with this far side because the waves are breaking on rocks on the distant side there. So I don't need to be too precise with my line. And then, so it's still quite dark here, but it does go a bit lighter and a bit greener. I'm going to add in a bit more viridian to this, a bit more viridian to the mixture. I'll need to add in a little bit of water in a minute to go lighter. I'm painting around my middle breaking wave here. Paint around my boat. And then just lightly touch the surface. And if you've got rough paper, this is a little bit easier, but just lightly touching the surface here, dragging the brush over, using the side of the brush, nice light color, trying to suggest the those distant waves and the surf on that side. Now, coming down, I need to go a little bit of a harder edge. My top. My main wave. Then that's my wave. This area here is flatter. This is where the water is, I think, is going slightly uphill onto the beach. It may be just kind of settling there before it's dragged back down the beach. But there's lots of, if you look carefully at the source photo, there's lots of little subtle horizontal lines, and it's a little bit lighter than that area there. Bit more water into my mix. And starting from my breaking wave that's got some indentations in it. And it's also going a little bit narrower into the distance up to my boat, other side of the boat. get these horizontal lines, I'm using the tip of my mop brush at a slight angle and just dragging it along. I could use my medium pointed round brush for this, but for continuity, I'll just use my mop brush here. Nice and light. We'll put some darker lines on the top when this is dry. And these lines will get thinner as we go into the distance. There's another little breaking wave here. And then the sand, bottom right corner, is, well, for me, is a little bit of light red, a little bit of yellow ochre. Just to fill in that bottom right corner. Just as the wave is breaking over, there's a little bit of a shadow just on the very edge of the breaking wave. So I will, so I could use, no, I think I'll use my smaller pointed round brush and something. So this is still damp. So like my clouds, I'm going to get a soft edge, but I want a hard edge where it's meeting the breaking wave. So just in there. Adds a little bit of definition to the wave. Gives it a bit more volume. Likewise, a little bit on that wave there. Within that wave, there's some subtle darker areas. It's kind of all frothy and there's lots of movement there. To suggest that, I'm going to just dampen this area over most of the area. Clear water. That's a little bit dirty. Let's give it a good clean. And then just drop in a little bit of, I'm just lifting off some of that water. There's a bit too much water. Just drop in a little bit of a blue to create the feeling of that froth, a cobalt blue or a cerulean blue, a light blue. That's a little bit too dark. And a lot of these lines, they're going to be diagonal as well. Almost like a 45 degree angle. Little spots here and there. Observe the photo just to get some idea on what sort of lines to create and how many of them. Now that portion of the sea is now dry. I can go in now with some darker color, pretty much the same colors as I was using before, ultramarine blue, bit of viridian green, ultramarine blue, viridian green, and with the appropriate brush shape, just create some little sort of elliptical shapes to suggest the movement of the water. Thinner lines in the distance, thicker lines nearer to us. And this is drier down here, so I can do a few more of those lines just down here too. Make it a little bit more interesting. Yeah. Hopefully that looks a little bit more sea-like, a little bit more wave-like. Add a little bit of a curvy line to the top of that wave. This boat here, I'm going to make, what color shall I make it? Yellow. Make it stand out a little bit more. And we'll put some figures in a minute. Right, now I need to define these towns and the buildings a little bit more. This is where I'm going to use a small flat brush for this. And when I look at these towns with a squinting my eye a little bit, I see warms and cools and just a few darks. But we just want to again suggest these buildings. We're not drawing, we're not painting in every single building. We're just trying to create the impression of these very distant buildings. And I'm going to use a combination of a couple of colors, a light, I think a light red, and then a light blue. So I use a light red first of all with this flat brush. So use a small brush, ideally a flat brush or a brush with a flat edge to it, and some weak light red for this. And then just that's too dark. Better. Just put in a few little of these geometric shapes, squares, rectangles, to suggest those redder areas. Likewise in that little one there, not too much. So you want to still keep these areas quite light. Maybe just a few more up here. This very distant one. And then same brush, a little bit of blue. Actually, talking about blue, there's a bit of this darker area here. It does create a little bit of a cast shadow over the top of the town. So we're going a little bit stronger with this blue. Just in that top portion there. Right, coming on to the bigger buildings now, there's a bit of a shadow on the left of the hotel, just a little thin line going down like that, and then over to the left as well. And the main buildings in the city, likewise, we need to create some form of those by putting some shadow on the left-hand side of some of these buildings. A little bit of shadow on our tall, narrow one. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of the beach that we can see just below those buildings. Not too dark. That might be a bit too dark there. Line it up a bit. And I need to go a bit darker at the base of some of these buildings where they're just meeting the back of the beach, I guess. Add a little bit of ridging green into that, suggest some distant trees. Well, we're nearly there. We've just got to add in a bit more detail now, and a bit of detail to the buildings, some figures, some bathers as well. But we're nearly there. Right. So I need to make sure these buildings are dry before I add some windows and lines to those. Let me just add in some figures then to the boat and maybe some bathers. I need to go to a much smaller brush for this. So smaller, a lot smaller in size than that medium one. So this one's a size 6. Right, I need a good point with this and pick up something dark for these figures to stand out against the sea. So let's get. I need to make sure the proportions, the size of these figures are right as well. So in this boat, let's have. Is this brush small enough? There's one figure. Another figure there. Right, get some figures in the surf. The good thing about these figures is we don't need to bother too much about legs and feet. So we just see the top parts of their bodies, just create the feeling of these bathers going into the surf. There's some open area here. You could, if you want to, put some swimmers in here, or you could you could put in a surfer as well. I'm sure they do surfing there. On the photo, there's somebody actually crashing into the waves. Right, let's put in now. I put those figures in there. That will be my guide. So as I go into the distance, of course, I need to make them a little bit smaller. And the with the perspective, the top of the figures are going to be a little bit higher in the distance. So let's get in one there. Get another figure, small head. one in here. And then just tiny little dashes really for more distant figures like that. All right, building time. That's almost dry up there. I'll do that last of all. This is drier down here. Some very, ooh, some very selective, mainly horizontal lines for some of these buildings. There are a few vertical lines, and there are a few little sort of individual windows, but that would be, in my mind, just a bit too much detail. So not too dark, not too light, just to suggest a few lines of those distant rows of windows. I'll leave the tall building. And it doesn't matter if some of these lines are broken lines as well. It can be where the sun is catching some of the windows. Right, the hotel has got some very light, there's lots of floors to this hotel. I need to be very careful here. Something like that. And then my shanty towns. No, I don't want to put too many, need to go a bit darker. I don't want to put too many marks in here because it would just make it a little bit too busy. But just a few lines to suggest maybe windows, shadows, darker rooftops. Not too many, just do a few and then look at it and think, have you put in enough to suggest those very, very small buildings in the distance? Might be enough. I think lastly, I want to put a bit more definition to the texture on the two brothers, and there's sort of these cracks coming down the side of the rocky face. So I could use a small rigger brush, or let's just, with my small flat brush, see if I can suggest some some of these textures. That could be a little bit too wet, so there we are. If I've done too much, just quickly with my fingers, see if I can just mop out some of them. Try and connect to the wooded slopes a bit more. Over here, there's on the far side of the shoreline. It's quite, to me, it looks quite misty in the photos. So I'm just going to do a little bit of gentle lifting off with a sponge again, just to, like I use the sponge up here to get those, to lift off, get those softer clouds in there. Let's just see if I can do likewise on this right-hand side. So damp sponge and just gently dabbing. Do it in one area first and see what you think. So I'm just trying to create the feeling of a little bit of that sea spray and mist and soften up some of those edges. There we go. It's a little bit lighter. Hopefully you can see a little bit of difference there with the lightness and softer edges. I've I've lifted off some of my distant figures, but it doesn't matter. Let's add a final thing. A little bit of detail to my boat there. It would benefit from a little bit of a line, some markings across the top. And maybe impression of a darker area to the bottom of the hull. Right, I think I'm done. I hope you enjoyed that. Our virtual trip around the world. Rio, thanks very much again to Sandra. And yeah, low clouds, trying to get low clouds over those distant mountains, and a couple of techniques there, wetting wet and a little bit of lifting off as well. There are other techniques as well. So look back at that Zoom call, those Patreon folks, look back at that Zoom call for other techniques that were shared by other members. And the effect of the waves coming in as well, a bit of movement with the water and some figures in there, maybe the boat to suggest the force of the sea. Well, thanks for watching. And as I normally do now, if any of you have been painting along with me, or you've done a little sketch or a little bit of work in progress, those of you that have done this before, there's a few volunteers coming up here already. Yeah, so let's take a look at what you've been up to and share your progress so far, or even a finished painting. And this is just